Let me start by saying I lived in a cutoff my whole life. And it's called a cutoff because it's just that. You drive to the end of the road and it freaking cuts off. It's a residential neighborhood in New Orleans, woods that lead to the levee, and on the other side of the levee is the river. Now, my family has been here in the cutoff since it was built, 1940. My grandfather was known as the king of the cut, mainly because he was in the business of booze and gambling, but also because my grandfather didn't stray away from violence. But this story is not about my family. It's about me as a kid. I remember playing along those levees, the excitement of getting our hands on these cardboard boxes. Me and all my cousins climbing to the top of the levee, sliding down on those boxes. The most fun I had my entire life was doing this as a kid with all my family. But you know how it is when you're a kid. You believe you're invincible. Ignore all kinds of danger. Nothing can get you. Screw the alligators that were right there in the river. Didn't worry about them. Forget about the water moccasins who were right there in the weeds. We didn't worry about them. Just didn't care. And for the most part, our parents didn't either. But for some reason, every year around late August, early September, Grandpa would freak out saying, "Y'all stay off that damn levee." And when I tell you he would freak out, I mean he would stop whatever he was doing and physically come where we were to stop us. This particular year, I'm 13 years old. It was September 1st. I'll never forget it because it was my little sister Lillian's birthday. We were out there on the levee, sliding on them boxes. Now, the weeds had grown up to over 7 feet tall, and you could see where it looked like someone had kind of been walking down there, but we thought nothing of it. So picture the scene. Lillian is on the front side of the cardboard, I'm on the back. We take off down the levee, and the grass is a little moist, so we're really sliding. We hit those weeds, and they begin to lay down. Next thing you know, she and I done slid 10 to 12 feet way further than we anticipated going. Now, remember I told you, the grass was moist, but we hadn't realized that the river itself had pushed up into those weeds. Then all of a sudden, the cardboard box begins to take on water. And I remember the disappointment on my little sister's face as she said, "Oh man," coming to the realization that we were no longer going to be able to use this wet cardboard box. Now the two of us are still sitting there talking, but something reaches through the weeds, grabs the side of that cardboard box and gives it a tug. Not a super hard tug, but just enough of a tug for us to realize that something's going on. She turns over her shoulder, looking back at me, eyes wide open, and the next thing you know, we are yanked. And when I say yanked, we are yanked hard. Now we're moving from left to right through the weeds, making this zigzagging motion. Lillian is screaming. I'm looking around. The more she screams, the faster we move, and then we hit something. Looking back on it, I think it had to be a rock because it tears the wet cardboard box in half, and I see Lillian moving away from me as I continue through the weeds. Listen to me. I don't know if you ever found yourself in a situation where you're so terrified you just don't know what to do. That's where I was. I was so afraid that I couldn't make up my mind what I should do. Listen, I can't explain to you where this thought came from, but something told me to try and stand up and jump off the box. Imagine me, box still in full motion, sliding through the weeds slapping me all across the side of the face. I'm trying to maneuver my body to my knees. Looking down, I see this hairy hand, a huge, gigantic, hairy hand with fingers clamped down, dug into that cardboard box. Following that hand, I see a forearm, a bicep, a shoulder, all covered in hair. And that's when I saw this thing's face and was completely, utterly terrified. Because it looked like one of those monkeys in a National Geographic magazine, except for its face was huge. Nose flat, pressed into its face. These gigantic eyeballs looking back at me. Pointy cheekbones penetrating under the flesh of its face. And it was smiling at me like it was having fun, pulling me through the weeds. Now listen to me, I don't know if that smile is how these things look when they're having fun, but for me as a kid, it was just this sinister smile, revealing these gigantic yellow and blackish teeth. Again, I can't explain to you what was happening to me physiologically, but now listen to me, I can't even articulate any thoughts that were going through my mind at that moment, because there weren't any thoughts. I was just completely afraid. And listen, I didn't think of doing this. I just rolled off the box. Next thing you know, I'm laying face down in the mud, and anybody who knows me knows that I do not like having my face dirty. but no time for that whatsoever. Now I'm up screaming, running back in the opposite direction through the weeds, up the levee, mud compacted in one eye, the other eye wide open. And when I get to the top of the levee, I realize I'm 7 blocks away from where we started. Screaming at the top of my lungs, this older boy, Gerard, comes running. And he's like, Lisa, what's wrong? Barely able to speak, I mouth the words. Something grabbed me. Now listen to me, fearful, afraid, traumatized, none of those words actually can capture the feelings and emotions that I was going through. Gerard walks with me about a half a block through the neighborhood when I literally see my entire family, some of them on the street, others on top of the levee, everyone with guns. For a moment, everyone thought that Gerard had done me something. So now this poor kid who helped me is laying on the ground, scared for his life, guns pointed in his face. Lillian, my sister, is running up, hugging me, spearing more of the mud from my eyes into my mouth and into my nose. I'm crying, trying to tell my grandfather what happened. This look comes over his face and over the face of every other adult that's standing there. I want you to understand at this point in time, this has been such a huge commotion in this neighborhood that there are over 50 adults outside. And 15 minutes later, I watch as 24 men go over the levee looking for what Lillian and I described to them. Now, for years, that was where the story ended for me. No matter who I asked, there was no way of getting any more information about what happened. I asked my grandfather, I asked my father, I asked my aunties, my uncles, my mother. Nobody would tell me anything. But get this, I'm 21 years old. We're boiling crawfish and hanging out on that same levee. My Uncle Tank is drunk as hell and he gets to running his mouth talking about how him, my grandpa, and my uncles all went chasing down this Bigfoot that tried to kidnap Lillian and me when we were kids. He goes on to explain every detail, how they followed the trail through the weeds, found where it crossed the Mississippi River, then went and got boats and tracked it down into the swamps on the other side of the river. According to Uncle Tank, everyone was pissed. And the only reason why they turned back is because Grandpa found a 12-foot long alligator. Its neck broken, skin ripped from its tail, a bite taken out of the meat. Understand, Tank is standing up in front of everyone, beer in his hand, drunk, acting out the scenes of them going through the swamps. That's when he says Grandpa stopped them from going forward because whatever killed that 12-foot long alligator and broke his neck was going to be one of the bigger Bigfoots that they've ever seen. And he told them they didn't need to be in the swamps trying to fight something like that. Look, after all these years, I come to a couple of conclusions about my Bigfoot encounter. Number one, if that Bigfoot wanted to take us, it could have just grabbed us, both of us, and ran off. Over the years, it had been watching us kids play and slide down the levee, and it decided it wanted to play too. But it just didn't understand that to us, it was nothing more than a monster.